Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining, and welcome to another session of our Day One and Beyond series, where we take you through various topics and activities related to building solutions on Oracle Cloud. My name is Joey Hall, and I'll be your host for today's session. This will be the third session of our 8-part series on the Oracle Analytics Cloud Platform, or OAC, and it will be an introduction to datasets. This overall series is designed to help you unlock the full potential of OAC and transform your data into actionable insights. Because in a world increasingly driven by data, OAC empowers organizations to uncover hidden patterns, make data-driven decisions, and drive success with advanced analytics capabilities. I'm thrilled to kick off the session with all of you today as we explore how the platform can revolutionize the way you work with data. This session is being recorded, and you'll be able to find the recording on Cloud Customer Connect. You can also find the recordings and slide deck PDFs of previous sessions there as well. So to lead us through today's webinar, I'm honored to introduce our featured speakers, Uma Kumar from our customer enablement team and Pete Medura as our analytics expert. So with that, I will hand it over to Uma.
Thanks, Joey. Hi, everyone, and welcome to your third session in the series. This one is an introduction to datasets in Oracle Analytics Cloud. Like Joey mentioned, my name is Uma Kumar. I will be taking us through the slide deck in the beginning of the session, and I'm joined by the lovely Pete Medura, who is going to be taking us through the demo and the OAC console for the bulk of the session. So what I'll be going through today is first we're going to give you an overview of OAC. This will be a refresh for those who have attended our previous sessions. Once we kind of go through that, then we'll be starting on our key features of datasets, where we'll talk about data prep, how we're defining datasets, connections, and so on. And then I will hand it to Pete to take us through the demonstration in which he will kind of deep dive on several of the features and more that I introduce in the slide deck. And then we'll also have time at the end for Q&A as well, so we can stay on and answer your questions live. But as Joey mentioned, you can feel free to drop them in the chat or drop them in the Q&A section as well. All right, so let's get into our overview of Oracle Analytics Cloud. So Oracle Analytics Cloud, or OAC, can be thought of a comprehensive analytics platform. It can provide you with capabilities for things like augmented analytics, self-service analytics, as well as governed analytics. So today we'll be focusing on datasets as part of the self-service analytics. That's going to provide you with a complete end-to-end service environment for things like data visualization, workbook creation, and collaboration. You can also look at the augmented analytics side of things. OAC has a lot of built-in AI capabilities like auto insights and natural language queries. And you can take advantage of, the enterprise architecture and security features of Oracle Analytics Cloud, kind of allowing you to scale and extend out to an enterprise level as part of the governed analytics. So in Oracle Analytics, I want to take you through a kind of holistic view of the analytics workflow that you can see from this diagram. So we start with more technical tasks like connecting to relevant data sources or maybe modeling the physical sources into logical business views. And then we can allow for data prep and data enrichment. This stage is kind of where Pete will be spending most of the session in that datasets section. Next, then you'll have your more business-centric tasks like exploring the data, making insights. It allows you to create visual stories as an experience, and then the ability to share through collaboration with your different colleagues. Okay, so now let's go into our overview of datasets. So first, I'll start talking about how you can connect your data. So you can quickly get started with over 100 native connectors that provide connections to dozens of sources like our Oracle Autonomous Database, Enterprise Performance Management, and Fusion applications. You can also connect to several non-Oracle sources like Google BigQuery, Salesforce, Snowflake, and more. There are several different connection categories as well, including things like I mentioned, like Oracle applications, database technology, OCI services, and different storage locations. And you have different connection options. So many connections will offer multiple ways to authenticate user credentials. So why should you be preparing your data? Data prep is going to be a crucial aspect or component because it's going to ensure the quality and consistency of your data. It allows for accurate and reliable analysis by cleaning, organizing, and transforming raw data before using it for visualizations and insights, which is going to ultimately lead to better decision making based on reliable information. So some benefits, like I mentioned, improving data quality by removing inconsistencies, missing values, and outliers to produce more accurate results. You can also reduce errors like catch and correct data errors early in the process to avoid, misleading interpretations and visualizations. And this will also allow you to enhance your visualizations. So the more well prepared your data is, kind of the better and more accurate your visualizations will look. Some options for data prep, some things you can do, like replace missing or null values, converting text columns to date or time columns, or maybe hiding and deleting columns. And I wanted to mention too, for auditing and compliance, OAC does track all data prep steps into a script before you submit and solidify your changes. Another great benefit of Oracle Analytics Cloud is that it provides you with recommendations for data preparation as well, based off of the data you utilize. So you'll have enrichment recommendations that will enable you to enhance your data without requiring like a data scientist expert. And when you select a recommendation, then the change is going to be added into that preparation script and will be applied whenever you save the dataset or just choose to apply the preparation script. So today in the demo, we'll be learning a few things. First is understanding how we are defining a data set in OAC. So it can be thought of as a self-service data model that contains multiple tables with relationships defined between the tables. We'll also be discussing how you can easily import local data sources as well as combine different data connections. There are a few other features that you should keep in mind as well about dataset development in OAC, like applying row-level security as well as writing custom SQL. Next, we'll talk about how you can transform your data mainly through data flows. Data flows enables you to organize and integrate your data to produce curated data sets that your users can visualize. So you can use them to manipulate your data visually without requiring any manual coding skills. So for example, you could use a data flow to create a data set, combine data from different sources, aggregate data. You can even train machine learning models or apply predictive analytics model to your data, but we'll be covering that a little bit more in a later session. And you can also perform object detection, image classification using a services like OCI Vision service. And you can orchestrate and manage multiple data flows by adding them to a sequence, which is just going to be a collection of data flows, data set refreshes, and other sequences. Okay, lastly, I want to talk a little bit about sharing and security. So if you've attended our previous sessions on dashboarding and visualizations, the sharing and security is a little bit different when it comes to workbooks versus dataset. So this is where I'm going to ask Pete to jump in here and just give us a brief overview on maybe some of the differences between how you save and store a dataset like versus a workbook.
Yeah, thanks, Uma. The main difference is data sets within this platform are stored globally. They are not stored in folders or a catalog like a lot of the dashboarding objects. So basically allows anyone with access to them can get them and they don't have to worry about logically putting them in folders. But also that said, there are ways to group them on the front end if you have a lot of similar data sources using custom groups on the front end to just group your different data sets if you would like to have that look and feel of a bucketed set of similar data sets. And I'll be talking a little bit more in the presentation about what we can do with the security and the permissions.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. All right, so now we've reached the stage of our demo. So I'm going to let Pete now take over and share his screen to take us through the demo portion.
Great. Thank you so much, Uma. Great overview as always. And hello, everyone. Again, my name is Pete Madur, and I'll be covering the demo portion of today's webinar. Thanks for attending Intro to Datasets, which is our third installment for our OAC Day 1 and Beyond series. And for the next 40 minutes or so, I'll walk you through the basics, starting with a description of datasets, then moving through all the related functionality that you can do with them. We'll also be covering data flows and sequences near the end of today's session. I've already covered basic navigation on previous sessions, so if this is your first time with us, or if you would like a refresher, please check out the previous sessions which are currently available on demand. With that, let's get started. Before we can dive into developing datasets, we need to understand what a dataset is. Simply put, datasets are self-service data models that you build specifically for your data, visualizations, and analysis requirements. A dataset can be comprised of multiple objects and multiple object types. When you create and build a dataset, you can choose between many types of connections and spreadsheets or files. For example, you can build a dataset that includes tables from an autonomous data warehouse, tables from a Spark connection, and a local CSV file. You can specify joins between objects, and you can transform and enrich each of the columns within your dataset. This means datasets are extremely flexible and will support most of your self-service requirements. Let's get out of PowerPoint and take a closer look at the connections by category. We're going to start with local flat files. Once imported, these files can be refreshed and even replaced if the structure of the file has changed, meaning you removed or added additional columns to your dataset. But please be aware that files do have some import limits. Moving on to connection-based datasets, OAC has over 40 native connectors, and that list is continually growing. Connection-based data is not stored in OAC, only its metadata. The data itself is displayed or rendered when you run a query or dashboard. I've grouped them into categories to help us navigate them. We're going to start by storage locations. These are cloud-based locations for your files. And if you have the opportunity to use these, they do have an added benefit versus your local files, because anything sitting in a storage location can be programmatically refreshed on a schedule. Next, moving on to database technologies. These are your popular enterprise databases, whether they're relational, big data, cube-based, multidimensional. This is just a sampling of what we have available. And these are some of the sources that are most commonly used within this platform. We also have a grouping of several generic connectors that use common protocols like Delta sharing, REST APIs, and even a JDBC connector for on-premise or some legacy data sources. Next up are the OCI application connectors, and these are connectors to some of Oracle's SaaS applications like Fusion, NetSuite, and Service Cloud. And lastly, I want to take a moment to talk about some of our OCI service connections. Now, this group of connectors you do not add directly to datasets, unlike all the others. These are connecting to other OCI services where you're typically getting outputs from machine learning models, AI models, Spark jobs, and potentially even Python scripts. So these can be integrated into your overall data story, but they're not really going to be pulled into our data sets. But I did want to mention them and just let you know that they are part of the entire platform. And also, please check out Oracle Analytics homepage for a listing of all available connectors. All right, now that we've covered what types of data you can access, let's see what you can do with the data. Here we are in the OAC home screen. I'm running on the January 2025 Enterprise Edition. I'm currently logged in as an administrator, and to execute any dataset development, you must be a DV author or have been granted additional permissions within the platform. We're going to start by importing an Excel file, and let's do that now. We'll go to Create, Dataset. We'll select our file. It will quickly profile the data. We only want one sheet from it, and we're going to say OK. At this point, we have manually imported a local Excel file, and we are now in the dataset editor. Let's go ahead and start on the top left and walk you through how this page is constructed. Up here, we have our Files and Connections panel. This is where it will display any connection and/or file that you've added to your dataset. As you can see here, we've only have one file so far in this dataset. And I know we've already mentioned that you can combine data from different connections within a single data set and can even add additional files to that same data set. I'll be showing how to join these types of situations a little later in the session. For now, let's keep going with a single object to start. All right, the system has provided some visuals for each of the columns here, like histograms and percentage lists. At the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that we're on the Join Diagram tab down here. So on the Join Diagram, this area is for managing relationships or joins between your objects, which we'll cover in a little bit. You'll also notice we have another tab at the bottom of the screen representing our newly imported Excel data source. As you add more objects to a data set, each object will have their own tab. Let's click on it to see our options. This is called the Data View, which is the default view, and it looks similar to the view on the Join Diagram tab, but now we have access to all the data preparation features. Within this view, a preparation script panel has been enabled over here on the left-hand side. This panel tracks and helps manages all of your data preparation steps associated to the selected object. Each data preparation step you add is tracked here and can be edited, reordered, and deleted to ensure you always know how your data got from A to Z. Moving over to the top right of the toolbar, we have what's called a metadata view. This allows you to see your data presented slightly differently, which can be helpful when reviewing and/or implying data preparation steps. We'll come back to this screen in a few minutes. Next, we have our handy undo and redo buttons, along with an option to reprofile your data. Next up is our edit definition area. For spreadsheets and files, there are two main features I would like to review. First is the filter option. There are many situations where part of your data should never get into any dashboard, and this is one way to limit it. Let's add a simple filter on this data set to see how it works. On the top menu here, you can see click here to add filter. It'll give me a listing of all of my columns in my data set, and we're going to select subcategory. We're just going to randomly select a bunch of them, and we're going to say exclude. Once you've added or removed your filter, this Get Preview Data down here in the center of the sample data option is enabled, and you can press it to refresh your sample rows to see if the filter has taken hold. Another important option to be aware of is this Select option right here. This is where you need to go to upload a new file whose structure is different. Simply select the new file and import. But please be aware, if you've built any workbooks off of this data and the structure changes, that may impact your visuals. For example, if I imported a CSV and I want to upload a new file to replace it, where some of the columns have been removed from the original, any visuals connected to those removed columns will be impacted. All right, let's cancel out of here. And let's start moving on to the data preparation features. This platform offers dozens of ways to help you identify and clean or enhance your data. We're going to start with data types. These are represented by the icons to the top left of the column names. The three main types are attributes, measures, and date times. Attributes are indicated by the A icon and are for all non-measure and non-date type columns. Just to note, it's common for a number field to be an attribute, like ID columns, and other data points you don't want the system to aggregate. Measures are indicated by the pound icon, and we have a measure right there. These are only for number columns you want the system to automatically aggregate. And then finally, we have some date time columns, and these are indicated by the clock icon. To change a data type, simply select the icon and then just make the changes that you'd like. The system does use logic to apply initial data types upon import, but always double check these before building anything. Let's take a look at our data set. I can already see my row ID column over here is a measure-based column because of the pound sign icon. I can also see additional properties in the bottom left-hand corner if I select that column. So down here in the bottom left, I can see, oh, there's an aggregation of sum down here. But this is not a column I want to aggregate. So we're going to switch this to an attribute. And now you'll see that the icon has changed and there is no more aggregation on it. Let's look to see if we have any other columns that need to be updated. This data set is mostly text columns. But here, I see quantity. This one is actually, if I look at the properties, it's being treated as a text field. So before I can switch it to a measure, I want to convert it to a number and then make it an aggregable measure. So we're just going to open up the options menu, those three little dots there to the right of the column, and we're going to say convert to number. And then we'll make it an attribute. Or I'm sorry, we'll make it a measure. And then we'll just double check the aggregation method, sum. I think a sum is going to work for our quantity column. I think that works good. And then you can also see up here, all of these changes are being added to basically our audits and compliance tracker. All right, we can also add some default formats to our columns. If we look at the discount column, I think this can be improved. First, I want to make this an average aggregation type. Then I want to format it as a percent. So if I select the column, I come down to my properties panel, aggregation, I want it to be average. And if I go to this number format option, I can make it a percent. So you can see there. There's very little wasted effort when you're making these changes, because every change you make here, you're saving time from someone having to make those same changes, especially if they're going to be applied most of the time for your front-end developers. Let's take another example. Let's go take a look at my order date column. I can see this column only has dates, so I can format out the time component, and let me adjust this to remove the seconds. If I come down here to my formatting tab, I'm just going to clear out the time component, and there we go. All right, now I want to spend a few minutes on attribute columns and talking about some of their available functions. Let's take customer ID. I can see at the red in the chart above, and it's telling me something. It's saying about 10% of my values are null. So what if I wanted to actually fill in those values with some other value so I don't have actual blanks? Well, you can do that within here. If I go to the options menu, I'm going to go to edit. And right here, you can see this field is coming directly from our data set without any transformations. And on the right-hand side, I have a whole host of functions that I can apply to any of my columns within my data set. But what I want to do here is I want to fill in the nulls. So I'm going to use the function if null. I'm going to select my customer ID column. And what do I want replaced when it finds a null? I'm going to say not available. We're going to validate. And if I come down here, you can already see is getting applied. There you go, not available. And finally, you just want to add the step to formalize it. So now that's just another way of helping you use the indicators that it provides you, but also clean up the data and have it all tracked. Now, let's go ahead and quickly move over to the region column. Now, I can see some data quality issues here because I know the data. I know we do not have a Western region, only a West region. For a situation like this is where you might not have the opportunity to go update the source system, but I can easily replace values in this system. By double-clicking on the value, I just changed that to West, and now Western is gone. It replaced all Western values with West. And now let's go look at the data preparation step. So here's my replace list region. I'm going to edit it. And you can see here, I had a nice little wizard for us. It's just the replace value wizard. Well, while I'm in here, I also know I don't have a southeast. I only have an east. So I'm going to fix this one too. And then I can say add step. And you can see my regions have now been cleaned up and everything is tracked over here on the compliance tracker. Now, I want to point out that many of the functions provided here, they basically open up a wizard to help you make changes, and a lot of them are a single click. So for example, if we go over to customer name, what if I wanted to split that into first name and last name? Well, we have a wizard for that. If I select options and I select split, right here. Okay, you want to split this column? What's your delimiter? Well, my delimiter is a space. There's only one occurrence. I have two parts, and I want my first part to be first name. And I'll even hide the source column. So right there, if I add the step, you now see I've created two new columns in my data set, and they are being sourced from our original column. And down here in the bottom right, if you can see, I got my little ghost. This ghost indicates any hidden columns. And it even says here, oh, you've hidden customer name. I can unhide it. And it'll pop right back in here. So you still have it as part of your data set. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of what can be accomplished within the data preparation area. We're not quite done with this area yet, but before we move on, I have three items I want to mention. One, these formats are simply defaults, and they can be overridden on the dashboards. For example, if I go over to one of my measures and I have sales here, my default aggregation is sum. But let's say for some visual, I need to have that, the user or the end user wants that to be an aggregation of average. You can do that on the front end. That's not a problem in this tool. Just like if I, in this section, remove all decimal places, because majority of the times we don't want decimal places, the users and the front-end developers can enable those decimal places to show whatever they want. This just really is for the majority of the times when you're using a field, how are people going to use it? And that's where the time savings really comes in. Number two, all updates in the dataset editor are automatically added to the preparation script panel. I think we've seen that. And third, your source data is never altered. These steps are simply applied at runtime. Okay. And lastly, Uma mentioned this earlier, where the system will provide recommendations based on your data. I'm going to open up that panel. You probably see me close it a few times over here. By default, it shows recommendations across all columns. But if you select a single column, it will filter to show any associated recommendations. Let's go ahead and select ship date. Well, you can see over here, these are all different one-click recommendations. What if you wanted a dedicated field for the ship year? Well, extract year from ship date. I'm just going to click that. And there it is. And I can even alias it right there by double clicking in there. Ship date year. All right, so really easy. It helped me basically. I did want to have a dedicated column for ship date year. So some of these are very useful. Another newer one is, what if you wanted to extract an age from a date? So maybe you want to see the number of months of age from ship date. Let's go ahead and click this option. And there we go. It has just created a dynamic calculation based off of ship date and current date to give me the number of months for my data. And of course, I could alias that too. These recommendations are automatically displayed when you're preparing your data. All right, so before moving on, let's save this data set. As I mentioned before, within Oracle Analytics, datasets are stored in a global area, not in a catalog or folder like other dashboarding objects. And we'll cover how to provide access to datasets a little bit later in the session. I want to pause for a minute here to see if there are any Q&A questions that haven't been answered.
Lynn has answered the couple that are in there.
Okay. I will keep moving then. Thanks, Joey. All right, let's move on to multi-object datasets. First, I actually want to start by creating a connection so you can see what that's like. We're going to set up a connection to an Oracle Autonomous Data Warehouse. So if I go up to Create, Connection, there's my Autonomous Data Warehouse. We'll give it a name, ADW 23AI. I'll grab some of the files, like the wallet, which includes the encrypted connection strings, and I will grab my credentials. And now we have just established the connection. So we can start creating data sets. And if I come to the main menu and go to Data, you'll notice that connections and data sets are basically two different object types within the platform. This allows you to create an unlimited number of data sets off of a single connection. It also allows for separation of duty, where not all users will have direct access to a connection, but sometimes you will just be given access to a data set that you will not have the ability to edit. So that is a nice distinction within this platform. Now, when you have there's my new connection. When you click a connection, the default behavior is to open the dataset editor. So while this is opening, all right, so it's a little bare, but this is the same screen we were on before when we had the Excel file, right? We have our join diagram at the bottom. We have our connections and files panel over here. But of course, with a connection, we have different options. So you can come over here and you can expand your schemas or folders depending on the connection. You can, of course, search for them up top. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to use my SH folder, and I'm going to take my sales file and I'm going to drag it over here to the main screen. So while that's rendering, doing a little profiling as I bring it in, you can see here pretty clearly, I have 5 foreign key columns and I have 2 measure columns. This is essentially acting as my fact table. Now that we got those there, I want to actually switch back to meta view. So we're going to switch over to the sales tab, switch back to meta view. And I actually prefer making edits on this screen, and I'll tell you for 2 main reasons. One, aliasing is quicker here because I can come here and I can just say quantity sold, enter, amount sold without having to use my mouse. So if you have dozens or 100 different columns, you need to alias them quickly, this is where you'd want to do it. Also, the other benefit from the data view to this view is you can multi-select. So for example, I'm going to select all these and I'm going to hide them. But maybe I just want it, another reason is because maybe I want to switch a bunch of different columns from attribute to measure or vice versa. So having that multi-select is very powerful, big time saver, which is again, sometimes why I like coming over to this section. If I go back to data view, you'll see we have our 2 new columns, and even down here, let's give it some format. We'll give it some currency. So it's a little bit cleaner for the user. And down in the bottom right, remember our little ghost? Here are our hidden columns. I am going to unhide them, but just kind of show you a few different features and definitely to utilize that metadata view. So great to be aware of that. Now, for connection source data, the edit definition screen offers additional functionality and provides access to edit the columns visually or the ability to write SQL. So I'm going to go into edit definition. And you can see here, this looks much different than it did before when we were just using a local flat file. This screen right here allows you to actually just remove all. You can add just selected. Because you can think of it, when you add a data set like a table or view, it essentially selects all columns. Here, you can visually select, deselect. I'm going to remove. Then I'm just going to add all. And if you're more comfortable with SQL, you can enter the SQL directly. At the end of the day, this whole entire platform is a SQL generator. So if you're comfortable in SQL, you can be writing all of your SQL scripts right within here. Again, they're only taking select statements. But when you're in here to test out your SQL, this get preview data is very handy to make sure that one, it is valid SQL. Two, let me run this really quick, to make sure you did grab the right columns. Because sometimes in your data sets that might have a couple hundred columns, you might be unsure of which one you selected. So having that get preview data down here is very powerful. I'm going to go back to select columns. So these are the ones that we've, again, selected visually within the platform. And one other area I want to make you aware of. For those in the audience today that have a background in other popular BI platforms when it comes to database connections, OAC defaults to live connections. And this is really what's coming over here, this live access. So there is never a need to preload entire tables or views to the platform. Using this live connection option ensures that every query will do a live pull of the data. Now, to be aware, OAC does come with the ability to cache datasets, and we'll discuss those options a little bit later in the session. So the ability to change the data access is another reason why you may need to navigate to the edit definition page. And to add, you have the same filtering capabilities we had before when we were just using a flat file. Let's go ahead and cancel out of here. All right. So as I mentioned before, all other data preparation options are available, just like we saw with the Excel file. But let's add some more objects to our data set and review the join options. I'm going to go back to the join diagram page, because remember, this is where you manage the relationships. I am going to bring in products. Just going to drop it here. Now, this auto join tables option is turned on. And you can see there, if the system can find foreign keys to join on, it will automatically. Let's go explore the join. So you can see there, by default, it did an inner join. It did match on 2 columns, product IDs. One thing to be aware of, this platform, you can only make joins on attributes. So something to be aware of in this platform. If you need more than one join path, of course, you can add them here. And if you need different relationship types, you can edit that here. Let's add a few more objects. Now, when designing your self-service data models using this platform, you typically want to start with your fact table, right? With where a lot of your measures, a lot of your aggregations are going to live. It's good practice, and the system will always perform better that way. But you can see, you can continue building these out. And again, all we're doing is building a query here. I'm going to trust that all the joins have been correct between all of them. And for any one of these, you can right-click on any object. And actually, you've seen at the bottom, right? You have a tab for every object we've added on here in case you want to go in and do data preparation steps for each one of those objects. But if I right-click on an object, you get a menu. And I would kind of want to go through a few of them now. You do have some shortcuts to basically open the data set, which is no different than clicking on it down here. If I just say open, it just basically puts the focus right into the data preparation area for that object. You can get right back to the edit definition. You can remove a table. And if you need to manually assign a join, you can say join to whatever table here. And I'll actually show that in a minute on another file. But there are 2 options I would like to spend a moment on: preserve grain and always including query. Preserve grain, I'm actually going to turn that on. You can see that's indicated by the little icon to the top left of that object. Preserve grain does exactly what it sounds. whatever the granularity of the table you apply this to, it will force other objects to comply and aggregate any available measures to conform to this granularity. Example data may be you might have month and day data in different objects, right? So if one of your data, if your facts are in months and another table is in day data, it will force those days and roll them up to month automatically. Or maybe you have header and detail information for maybe some transaction data. When you have objects of different granularities, attributes are ignored since attributes cannot be aggregated as same as the measures can be. Also, to utilize the auto insights feature that we covered during our intro to dashboarding session, this option must be applied to one of your tables within the data set. The next option is the always including query. I'm just going to put it on this table. We can see the little check mark right there. By turning this on, you ensure that any query generated with the data set will utilize any object with this flag turned on, even if you don't explicitly use a column from the object in your query. And here's maybe an easier way for me to explain this. Based on what you see on the screen, this query will only return results of records that match against that country's table, right? Because we said always including query, that means the query has to always join and make sure that it can join to this country's table or it will not produce any results. This is great for setting up row-level security if you're using a control table, and it's really handy to enforce limit for clean results if some of your other tables suffer from poor data quality. So two very important features to understand when you're building your self-service data models. All right, so far this data set has multiple objects, but they're all coming from one connection. Let's add a file to this. So I'm just going to say add file. We're going to use a channels file. I'm going to say OK. And there's that file. Now, I want to join this to sales. So I can just right click, join to sales. What do I want to join on? Channel ID. And look over here, channel ID. Channel ID was a measure, but it's basically saying only attribute columns can be joined. Do you want to treat this column as an attribute? And I'm going to say yes. It's basically helping me out. It's basically converting that ID column to an attribute simply to help me join on it. And there we go. Now I've joined this flat file to my data set. And again, the front-end developers and front-end consumers are never going to know. And even down here, you can see there's my little channels CSV file that is now fully integrated into this data set. And like I said at the beginning, if you had other connections that you wanted to add here, you can join those to a data set too. All right, there's one other feature here you might have seen, this manual query. For those that are comfortable doing writing SQL, there is a manual query option. I'm just going to drag this option over, double click it. And from here, you can write or copy and paste your SQL right in here. And I'm going to get preview data. So very powerful that you can also add just pure SQL components of it. Maybe you don't want to make all those different joins and you just want to do it in a nice little SQL script like this. Totally possible. So it really is, again, flexible to allow you to kind of work with the data how you are most comfortable. I'm going to cancel this. And I'm going to delete that manual query. Let's go ahead and save this so we can see what, based on what we've done so far, let's see what a front-end developer would see. So I'm going to say intro to datasets, multi-object. We'll let that save. Create a workbook. And here is our new self-service data model. So you can see the name at the top, intro to datasets, multi-objects. And now we have all of our different folders, or you can think of them, they're really database objects. And let's go ahead and open up some of them. All right. Not very clean, right? Got a lot of ID columns in here. Certainly not business friendly, have not been aliased. If I go into sales, we can see, well, I did alias these two, but we have a lot of ID fields that we probably don't need for analysis. They're just maybe only needed for joins. So I think you get the idea. Like there's potentially a lot of cleaning up we'd want to do here. And then we just show you quickly how to make some of these changes. All right. So first of all, you can look at the order of these. Started with sales, products, time. I'm going to close this. Well, it's just reading off the order of these objects down here at the bottom of the screen. If you want to rearrange them, simply drag them to how you would like them ordered. To alias them, I can just double click in here, give it a nice friendly name. Let's do one more for sales. Oh, just systems, there we go. Letting the system refinish its changes. And actually, I'll call this measures. And on this one, I'm going to switch to meta view. And like I did before, I actually want to hide a lot of those ID columns, right? So now that we've rearranged these a little bit, it's probably not perfect and there's a lot more aliasing and formatting we can do. But let's go ahead. Just going to remove that. We're going to save it. Let that save. Create workbook. And you'll kind of see the changes reflected now in the new structure. There we go. We can start to see some of the alias on the folder names. If I go into measures, it's going to be nice and clean here. I can, of course, start doing all of my, start building out my dashboard. So you really want to spend a bit of time making this clean for your front-end developers so they know how to navigate and logically group columns into the proper kind of folders for them to know where to grab them from. All right. So I want to switch over to a little bit of data set security. Let's close out of here. And I'm going to go to my main page for a minute. I'm going to go to my data set. Here's that multi-object one. Well, actually, I'm going to go to this one. I actually created another data set similar to the one we just saw, but I've cleaned it all up.
Pete, before you do that, I'm getting pretty specific questions that perhaps you could help with some clarity.
Sure.
Look at the two open questions in Q&A.
All right. Let me go to see if I can go get those.
First one is, would it be using a case statement on the date field, or is there another feature in DV to facilitate that? And I think that is in relation to...
Yeah, both of them are in relationship to answers I already gave that the query fields are incomplete.
Yeah, so would it be using a case statement on the date field, or is this another feature? So within the DV side, I mean, obviously we do have two case functions available in the platform for any dates. However, most of the date parts are automatically expanded for you. So if you bring any date into the platform, it will give you all the different lower level date parts without you having to build anything. And that's kind of standard from this tool. I'm not sure if that, and okay, in relation to mapping a date field to a fiscal year for a company, yeah, you can absolutely create different fiscal fields in here. If you have a calendar table, is really what would drive that. So if you had a calendar table that had calendar year, but also had your fiscal year, you would be able to utilize that and change it so it understands what your quarters are. So there are ways to be able to automate that so it knows what a quarter for your fiscal calendar is, not just based on a calendar year. No problem. And what are the grammar rules for using SQL to create data sets? It actually isn't limited SQL. I mean, you got to think about it. Obviously, you'd have to use, for an Oracle connection, you'd have to use Oracle SQL versus like a SQL Server connection. The syntax might be slightly differently, but it's really all about select statements, right? Because it's really just doing a select. So when you create data sets, it's just going to run any select statement that you put in there. But it is still a SQL editor. So most options in your valid SQL today, you can just copy and paste or manually write within there to produce most of this in SQL. Again, at the end of the day, all the system is doing is producing SQL to send down to the data sources. But most of the time we have those front-end tools so people don't have to write SQL. But I also do know a lot of people that have SQL in other applications and they just want to copy and paste it to kind of rebuild their reports here, and that's totally possible.
Well, let me ask a question then based on that. What about, where does SMML come in?
SMML is structured markup language that is dedicated for our semantic modeler. Okay. And actually, I'm pretty much at that point where I can talk about the semantic modeler. So if we give me one more minute, I'm going to switch over to that and explain the SMML language. This clean data set right here, right? This intro, basically I built another one. It's all aliased. I'll show you in a minute. But for talking permissions, first set of permissions is the object level permissions, meaning who can touch this object, and if they can touch it, what can they do? So first you would want to go to inspect, which is like properties. Go to the access panel, and here you can see I have a couple groups that have access to this. I have BI administrator that is full control, electronics division that has only read only, and I'm the owner of it, so I have full control. So this is just to give someone access to the object or data set. And what these different permission levels mean, read only is read only, read write, that allows you to edit the data set. So if you wanted to make changes to the data set and you have read-write capabilities, you can do that. Full control allows you to grant access to others, and it allows you to potentially delete the entire data set. So those are really the differences between the different permission capabilities within a data set. But now that's just getting to the overall data set. Within a data set, I mentioned earlier you can do row-level security within here using some control tables and the always including query. But you can also add here, I use this option up here, a role-based filter bar. So if you have application roles in OAC, for example, I have a group called my electronics division, I can add a row-level filter. So when any user in this group logs into this, uses this data set from any dashboard, it is going to apply row-level security. And maybe I want my row-level security to be, let's see, we'll let that come up. Product, I want my product category. Let's see, prod category. Let's get rid of that. That I have now just added a row level security for the electronics division. Okay, so this is one way, but sometimes for your data sets, you might have dozens of these row level securities for all different groups of users. And when you get into those situations and more complex situations like that, like needing more object level security, maybe the ability to create hierarchies or force varying levels of granularity, or needing to query multiple fact tables at the same time, we have other options within OAC, and that's called our semantic modeler. We won't be covering that today, but we do have a session planned in a few months to show you how to build out semantic models, and I'll cover why and when you should use a semantic model versus a data set. And I should also mention that the semantic modeler is only available on the Enterprise Edition of OAC. All right, we're going to switch over to, we only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to go a little quick here for refreshing cache and Excel files. Let's start with Excel. That one's easy. If you have an Excel file, all you have to do is right-click on it, reload, as long as the structure hasn't changed, find that file, select it, and you have now just refreshed your Excel file. That's how you manually refresh very easily. For data sets that have caching turned on, this is where you can reload data and run it now. Basically, you populate the caching, so maybe you do it every day, every morning before people come in there, and these can be run on a schedule. So that's how you basically take care of the performance and refreshing. And switching over a minute to data flows. Again, really quickly, we know we only have a minute or two left. Really, what is a data flow? They allow you to enable your organization and integrate your data to produce curated data sets that you can visualize off of. They are a drag and drop tool within here that allows you to visually create data sets without coding skills. And as you can see in my pipeline right here, you have different options. And basically you start with data. And then you add these different options. They're called nodes. So I start with data. Then maybe I select some data, right? So I'm selecting some columns, I'm ignoring others. Filtering some data. I have a very simple filter. I'm filtering out, excluding not specified records. Renaming, grouping, splitting. Like we've seen this already. See, another wizard. All these are wizard-based to be able to make these transformations and clean and enrich your data. Then join, bin, and ultimately, and you can have multiple joins, right? I could have 10 different joins on here. You'd be cleaning the data, joining it, cleaning that result, joining it, so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, you are going to save this data set back down to the platform as a CSV. And so it really is a lightweight ETL tool within this platform. Very easy to use, very powerful, can move a lot of data. Is not meant for your enterprise ETL, but it can move quite a bit of data within here. And the other thing I want to mention within here is these train numeric, basically these options down here. These are options for training and applying machine learning models and applying AI models. We're not touching that today, not because we're running out of time, but we have another dedicated session on ML and AI in 2 months, where I'm going to be covering how to train, how to get predictions, and how to utilize our AI models directly within the platform. And the very last feature today are sequences. This will take about 30 seconds. So what is a sequence? It's essentially an orchestration feature to sequentially run several tasks. And these can be run on a schedule. So for example, if I go create sequence, you can add 3 objects to a sequence. You can add data flows. So maybe I want to run a bunch of data flows. Then you can run, maybe you want to refresh the cache of a lot of different files in the morning. And then you can even add other sequences. So really, these are just an orchestration tool to be able for you to run a lot of different tasks within the platform, all within a schedule. And the important thing to know is these are run, these are not run parallelly. These are run concurrently. These are run one at a time. So it always has to finish the first step before it will get to the second step. And that's important because sometimes you might have a data flow creating an object, and then you need the next data flow to pick up that object and then start doing some more work to it. So they do run sequentially. And just like everything else in this tool, you have a native scheduler right within here, new schedule. And as a better way than scheduling 15 data flows to run, you can put them all into a sequence and run it as one object. And those are sequences. Super easy, super useful. And that was the last topic I had planned to cover today. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone who attended. And as always, I hope this was a good use of your time. I also want to say a big thank you to Uma, Joey, and the entire team that helps put these sessions together. And a quick reminder, our next session will be advanced dashboarding.
Awesome. Thank you, Pete. Great session. Appreciate your time and help with this. And I hope it was good learning experience for everyone here. I think Lynn got to all of the questions. So we don't have any additional questions for today, Pete. So I think we are good to go.
Great.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Appreciate your time.